thank you to attendees. I just want to let everybody know that all of these companies here are members of the Methane Mitigation Industries Council. They're all corporate members. And this is a little piece of the larger membership body, which is growing every day. This is also the lineup of companies that you will be introduced to, starting with John Lanahan at Agriculture and ending with Meg Baltus at Tradewater. Okay, so we're going to get going. I'm going to give it my best to do a 30-second version. So here I am representing Methane Mitigation Industries Council. I'm the founder and the executive director. The problem that my work is addressing is in that upper left-hand corner. There is a global emerging industry for methane mitigation. The industry is tackling the fastest climate solution, methane mitigation, providing the tools and services. But as you can see, those Legos are scattered across the entire globe. There's nothing connecting them. If you saw a piece of yarn between them, maybe you would suggest that they were somehow not fragmented and siloed. But the truth is, they are fragmented and siloed, all of these companies in this emerging industry. And so the solution to try to be able to coordinate such an important emerging industry is to throw up a big tent that brings in all of the kinds of companies that are going to be needed to make faster, deeper cuts in methane emissions. What you can see on the bottom right are the benefits. You can see that there are obvious climate impacts to the fastest climate solution out there, methane mitigation. You've got clean air and beautiful green trees, because the global temperatures are starting to stabilize when we are putting methane mitigation in. And you'll see that there are folks in that screen that represent finance, food systems, trade industries, oil and gas, emissions credits, and project developers working on implementing technologies. Those folks all have big smiles on their face because they're sharing knowledge, they're figuring out best practices, and they're moving forward together. Hard hats, jobs, we're making economic development, and the whole industry is thriving. So that's my deal. On to the first company. So John, you are up.
Tell me when.
I'm gonna pin you. And you are on.
All right, hey everyone. My name is John Lanahan, Director of Demand Agri-Capture. So I'm going to flip to the first slide. Hopefully.
Yep.
Agri-Capture works with rice farmers to incentivize practice changes that significantly reduce methane generated from rice production. So rice generates methane. So actually from the slide you can see here, the problem actually starts with water. It's an incredibly important global crop, feeds half the world's population, but when grown in a conventionally flooded environment, generates 12% of all agricultural related emissions. And maybe obviously it's incredibly water intensive as well. So rice, when grown in that flooded environment, the anaerobic conditions are a lack of oxygen in the soil. And so those microbes consume biomass and ultimately bubble up methane to the surface through the soil or through the plant itself. So most people don't realize that, but rice, incredibly, generates a ton of emissions, especially when you multiply that by millions and millions of acres across the globe. So next slide. To combat this, farmers can implement better irrigation management practices. So alternate wet dry or furrow irrigated rice are kind of the two methods that we use. In alternate wet dry, farmers actually dry down the fields mid-season. They reintroduce oxygen back into the soil and reflood, so we can reduce methane emissions by 70 to 80% doing it that way. Also, furrow irrigated rice, you actually grow rice in rows at a slight grade, run the water from the top of the hill down to the hill where it pools at the bottom, but the majority of the field is left exposed to oxygen. And so again, significantly reducing methane. And in both cases, you drastically reduce the amount of water because you're not constantly pumping water to keep those fields flooded. So next slide. So what do we do? So Agri-Capture, it's farmer first, and that's how we think about it. We're an end-to-end project developer. We streamline farmer enrollment, data collection, provide technical assistance as needed. We'll API integrate with John Deere operations to collect data directly from the field, do remote sensing verification to ensure the practices are happening, and then we create and verify environmental assets. To date, we operate in 4 distinct markets. So carbon credits, we've sold over 55,000 credits to date, issued by the Climate Action Reserve under the Soil Enrichment Protocol, which just received CCP labeling. We were also an A-rated project by B0. We work in supply chains in Scope 3 as well, so working with large U.S. CPG providers and in supply chain projects. We also have the ability to identity preserve or segregate the rice in the supply chain, providing traceability and data behind that for companies that want to build brands and make claims on package. And lastly, there's a lot of interest in water stewardship projects as well, so the water benefit is significant. Our impact to date has been significant, so 180 farmers across the U.S. In the Delta region, so Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas, and Missouri, 166,000 acres currently in our program, and have generated over 71,000 rice methane credits to date. So super excited to be a part of this coalition focused on tackling rice methane specifically, and now launching international projects as well. So thanks.
Beautiful. That was excellent. Okay, if anybody has a question for John, you can either raise your hand. Oh, there's a timer. Raise your hand, or you can put it into the chat, and I think I should be able to see it. Give it a second. So I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to throw it in there, and we can get to more questions at the end. John, rice in the United States. Can you give us an idea? It looks like this guy is standing in the US somewhere, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us
Arkansas.
an idea of Arkansas? Okay. So give us an idea of the market for rice in the US, maybe in comparison to the rest of the world. And
yeah. So rice there's about 2.8 million acres of rice in the U.S. So it's not necessarily the biggest crop in the U.S., but very impactful. Market is a lot of large buyers. So folks like InBev that are putting broken rice into beers, Mars, and a lot of pet food companies. Obviously, the Pepsis and Chipotle's and Walmarts of the world that maybe have their own private label rice sourced from our region. So typically, like long grain conventional rice is grown in the U.S. We don't grow a lot of like basmati or aromatic rice, but again, this is a huge problem, and we're focused today in the U.S., but launching in South America and other rice growing regions in the world.
Thank you. So if we've had either if we feed our pets or we eat Chipotle, we're probably involved in this this value chain. Okay, excellent. Thank you. All right.
Thanks.
So we're going to move on. And I obviously have not mastered Zoom. So here's John, his QR code, and this will be available after. Okay, David, you are up.
Okay. You can go on to my first slide. I'm David Henkel-Wallace of Bennu Climate, one of the founders and CEO. And we work on the destruction of methane that's either escaping or has already escaped into the atmosphere. Primarily, we have begun by working with the shipping industry. One of the great things about the shipping industry is it's a global industry, and it's an industry that is endogenously interested in climate. So many of the ship-owning companies are concerned about climate, their customers are concerned about climate, and the regulatory authorities, some of which, like the International Maritime Organization, part of the UN, are themselves responding to the shipping industry's own desires. So, for example, the EU has put a fine in for ships that emit methane, and LNG carriers are emitting methane. There's a general movement to convert the shipping industry to LNG as a transitional fuel, and LNG, of course, is almost entirely methane. So as it slips out of the exhaust stream, they start to incur fines when they go to Europe and elsewhere. And those are the kinds of things that we begin by addressing. Next slide, please. What we do, as I said, is we remove the methane. Unlike agriculture, who prevents it from happening at all, we go to problems where it's where places where it's a problem. And in the shipping industry, they talk of wellhead to wake, all the way. They're really concerned about the fuels all the way upstream. And so we concentrate on addressing the emissions in the vessels themselves and in the LNG fueling infrastructure. They call it LNG bunkering. This device, which is actually this literal device, is on its way to China to be installed next week on a vessel, removes fugitive emissions that happen when there are leaks into the atmosphere that cannot be prevented. We are also working with four of the largest LNG transport companies in the world to actually block the emissions by removing methane straight out of the exhaust stream, the methane that comes out of their engines. So we can operate on any gas stream, and what we do is we just take a natural reaction that happens up in the stratosphere and we bring it into our device where it can safely be applied to the gas as it passes through. So
I'm going to your next
slide,
slide.
please.
There we go.
Yes, thank you. So who are we helping? I mean, shipping travels around the world, and we don't have a project in the sense where you have to install a big piece of hardware or change things. These are small pieces of hardware that can be attached to all the different areas where methane is being emitted. But what we're doing is, by doing it around the world, we're helping everyone have a lower temperature and safer future. So thank you for listening.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, next company. Okay, Matt.
Hello there.
You're up.
MMC and Monica, our fearless leader. My name is Matt Jones, and I'm the Director of Partnerships at Brightly. You can go to the next slide, Monica. We really focus at the intersection of food waste and food insecurity. Here in the US, that 40% of surplus food goes to waste, where it decomposes and emits methane. And this is happening at the same time while 1 in 7 Americans are food insecure. And so we've decided to focus our efforts on food rescue organizations because of their unique positioning to effectively approach food waste and food insecurity. And so when a food rescue organization goes to pick up food from a manufacturer, a farmer, a retailer, oftentimes that food would usually end up in landfill. Well, because the food rescue organization prevented that and kept it within the human supply chain through food banks and partner pantries, we quantify the avoided methane emissions that each food rescue effort is responsible for. We generate carbon credits from that. And then when we sell those, we return the majority of the revenue to our FRO partners. And this is in an effort to help them scale. They are financially constrained and dependent on fundraising and grants. And so this could become their sustainable revenue that they can depend on year in and year out. And so you can move to the next slide, Monica. So we've partnered with around 230 food rescue organizations here in the US, one of which including Feeding America. And this network covers 97% of America's food insecure population. So when a company chooses to purchase a Brightly carbon credit, they're not only avoiding methane in landfills, but they are effectively addressing food insecure populations in almost every county across the US. Interestingly, we've developed a software to quantify the avoided methane emissions from food rescue efforts. But we also realized that what we built was a highly accurate food waste diversion calculator. And so we've been able to start applying this to food and beverage companies that are looking to divert food waste throughout their value chain, whether it be to anaerobic or aerobic digestion, biochar, compost, animal feed, whatever it is, we can provide very accurate MRV and project development. And so we have a goal here to help our food rescue organizations that are addressing increasing food prices, also in the face of SNAP funding cuts. And we have a number of FRO partners that have voiced concern about their ability to make it through the end of the year. So we are really proud of the work that we can do and look forward to addressing food waste and food insecurity with you all. Thank you.
And this is what it looks like.
These are all the people that our food rescue partners support. It's incredible.
Okay, so I'm going to open it up for questions, but I'm also ready to throw the first one out there. So if you have a question, pop into the chat or raise your hand. Good job on time, Matt.
Thank you.
FRO, can
Sorry,
you
Food
repeat again
Rescue
for?
Organization. Yes.
Okay. And can you talk about so far what your impact has been? What stage are you at in terms of having this calculator and working with food rescue organizations as well as food and beverage companies? What stage are you at today?
Yeah, so on our nonprofit Food Rescue Carbon Credit Project, we are nearing the end of verification, which is really exciting. And so we are in the active phase of selling forward contracts on pre-issuance credits. The volume of food rescue currently within our software, and this is just between 2020 and 2023 food rescue efforts, is above 5 billion pounds. And as we continue to ingest our food rescue partners' data through 2027, that will 3x. And so we're nearing the end of the validation and verification process for that. And we have a number of other consulting projects where we are helping companies identify diversion opportunities. They want to implement MRV on these efforts so that they not only get to account for the business positive outcomes of reducing food waste, like reducing hauling costs, better inventory management, sourcing, informing your sourcing decisions, but we also work on bespoke projects because of our unique FRO partnership where major retailers who donate to these food rescue organizations want to get a better idea about the food that they donate. And because of our relationship with these food rescue organizations, we're able to provide very granular information about the products that they do donate, which can have COGS and tax implications as well. So it goes beyond the environmental and the social impact, but can affect tax benefits as well.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got the next person up on the screen. That was accidental. Whoops, go back. Now I'm really showing how much I do not have here we go. There's Matt. I think most people on the call are aware, and thank you very much, Matt. MRV is measurement, reporting, and verification. I'm just realizing how many little 3-letter acronyms that we have and making sure that everybody's familiar with those. I'm going to go on to our next presenter, tee him up. Campbell, thank you. And
great. Sound check. Can you hear me okay, Monica?
I can.
Great. All right, just starting my timer. And first slide, please.
Thank you. And Campbell is at CDTI Advanced Materials.
There we go. All right, so sort of carrying on from where David described the problem, because we're working on the same issue, which is methane in shipping. And I won't repeat what David said because he did it so well, but I'll add some nuance to this. The shipping industry has, in many parts, converted from traditional diesel fuel or bunker fuels to LNG as a fuel because it's got a lower carbon intensity. It's about 80% of the carbon on an energy basis, as they look towards a net zero future. Quite when, we're not sure. But 3% of the fuel burned in the engines comes out of the exhaust as methane. So, whoops, they made a little mistake here, I think, because now that we're looking at methane using GWP 100, they've actually, after all this investment, neutralized or increased their net CO2 emissions on an equivalency basis. So I think there's a real opportunity here to, one, reduce the amount of methane going into the atmosphere and provide a solution to this industry. And there's, as David mentioned, there's a number of regulations that tax this, from Fuel EU to the European Emission Trading Scheme and the IMO, which just got delayed by a year. Next slide, please. CDTI has.
I don't know why we don't see it.
I'll keep going. Yeah,
this is your.
That's all right. So CDTI has been in the traditional emissions game for about 3 decades, reducing NOx, PM, carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide, etc. Three-way catalyst. Think of your cars, trucks, buses. So we have a traditional methane catalyst that solves this problem. We did quickly come to find out that the challenge is the sulfur in the fuel. So really, I would say our key technology is the sulfur absorbing catalyst that is sacrificial upstream of the methane oxidation catalyst. And so we have a replacement element that removes that little bit of sulfur in the fuel. And so the benefit of this, of course, you can go to the final slide, Monica, is the operators of these vessels that have been trying to achieve net or a net reduction of their CO2 equivalency. But funds like the IMO net zero infrastructure they would allocate the funds levied to disadvantaged nations like Pacific Island nations that will feel the impacts of global warming more than anyone else. And all of us as well with the reduction in methane. So thanks for that.
Yeah, no, good job. And I'm going to ask you to say, I don't know whether we heard it or not, IMO. Who is the IMO and what
Yeah,
did they
sure.
delay by a year?
Yeah, the International Maritime Organization, which is under the UN. So this is really the global maritime society, from shipping to everything on the water, really. And so in April, they voted to approve their net zero 2050 infrastructure framework. In just last month, they met to sort of implement that, thanks to pressure from the US, the Middle East, and other fossil fuel producing industries. It got kicked down the road by at least a year, which I think people are now starting to see in a bit more positive light, in terms of it's time to get it more right than it maybe was at the last month. But yeah, we certainly hope it comes back in a year's time.
Thank you. And I just want to acknowledge there was a beautiful photo of the actual technology that you're installing on ships, similar to what David had, the photo of the physical object. So I apologize that we don't see that. It should be up on the slide. We'll keep going and save any other questions for Campbell at the end. And next up is Reed.
Hey everyone, my name is Reed Calhoun. I'm the CEO of Climate Wells, where we work on projects that shut down oil fields earlier. Oil and gas fields are supposed to be shut down when they stop producing, but through the carbon market, we can expedite that by 20 or 30 years. You can go to the next slide. So we started drilling in North America, and to be clear, old oil fields is the largest source of methane on this continent. We started drilling here in the early 1800s, and those were originally Standard Oil and Getty Oil, these companies you might have heard of. But now you have oil fields like this, for which a town has been built around it, and it's now owned by the landowner or a school district or a tribe or a hospital system or some other small property and local engineering firm that's trying to run these things as best that they can. These wells were behind a youth baseball field in downtown Los Angeles. I say were because we removed them in 2024 with the help of JP Morgan. What we do is we measure the methane emissions that are coming from old oil fields, and we try to take them over and shut them down before they're required to be decommissioned. And that allows us to create really high quality carbon credit projects attributed to very measured real life methane emissions that are permanently and immediately sequestered. Can you go to the next slide? So I'll give you a little time lapse of what that looked like. So you'll see kind of as we work through, that's the oil field there. And then eventually, it's just a paved lot. So a very visible effect of every project, the removal of these fields. And you can go to the next slide. So the key pieces that we work on, methane, of course, but that's just because that's what we can monetize in the carbon market. Because you've also got volatile organic compounds, benzene, heptane, hexane, all the kind of worst gases that you expect from these projects. And they exist in Detroit, Dallas, Denver, Cincinnati, LA, Oklahoma City, Fort Worth, pretty much all major metropolitan areas across the mid-continent and West Coast were built around previous natural resource sectors. And so we can do very local projects for companies in those areas. And so we cut methane, cut it immediately. Health impacts are very visible and clear on decreases in cancer rates, asthma, preterm birth, all sorts of other sort of advantages to not living next to an oil field. And we're able to take a bunch of former oil and gas employees and retain and retrain them to be able to do a very local energy transition. That's what I got.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And we still have time on the clock. So if we have questions, you can either put them in the chat, raise your hand, or save them for the end. But I have one. Reed, we hear about oil and gas wells being abandoned, orphaned, but you're doing something different. You're working on marginal wells. Can you explain what the difference is and how you've had to tweak your business model to figure out how to get at those that are still working?
Yeah. So like orphan well is one for which there's no longer a solvent operator. They disappeared or otherwise went bankrupt. An idle well would be one that's not producing, but there is still someone who owns it. And then what we think of as a marginal well, which makes up over 70% of all oil wells across the country, are wells that produce at very low amounts. Typically, an oil well produces about 95% of its oil and gas in the first 3 years, but will continue to produce for like 70 years. While there needs to be a concerted effort to go after orphan oil and gas wells, and there are high quality carbon credit projects out there in the market to tackle those, we chose to go after active projects because the methane footprint of that, 70% of all oil field methane comes from wells that produce 5% of the oil and gas. And if we can stop those wells 20 or 30 years earlier, a spillover effect is that they don't become orphan oil and gas wells. Gives us a lot of historical data to base our baseline emissions on. All our projects are A-rated from B0 and registered and verified. We're the first carbon credit projects to receive a assurance from Big Four accounting firm in Ernst & Young. So we saw that the credibility of our projects increased because we were working on things that were, active and going to continue to be active, on an ongoing basis. I hope that answers your question.
Excellent. Definitely. Thank you. Okay, next up, we have Chris.
Hello.
Hey, Chris.
Thank you, Monica.
Okay,
Hi.
Chris Fort from One Shot Earth talking today about the Open Carbon Protocol.
Yes. Thank you, Monica. Oh, let me start my timer.
And so will I.
So
Go for it.
thank you. So my name is Chris. I'm the COO of One Shot Earth. We run the Open Carbon Protocol, and we were founded 3.5 years ago with the idea that carbon finance is a really important tool for driving climate action, but that the current market wasn't fit for purpose. So everyone here today, it's so inspiring to hear these different technologies and interventions. We're the platform that helps prove that, and we think that we have a new way of doing it for the modern era. So the way that the market was working, it's really slow. It can take, many people can talk about this, 2 to 3 years to take a new methodology, which is the recipe for how you create a carbon credit. And then on top of that, it's fragile. Traditionally, it's a stamp of approval. Trust us, the data is buried in PDFs. The process is a little opaque. And so we wanted to bring a modern data-first collaborative process to the market. And it's really great to follow Reed. He was our pilot methodology. There's a case study on our website about why Climate Wells decided to work with the Open Carbon Protocol. We do a bunch of things that we think are unique, but what I want to talk about today is our methodology development process. Instead of being something that we hold in-house, when somebody brings a methodology to us, we hire independent experts. So for Reed's case, there was experience in validation. There was academics about oil and gas use. There was other project developers who aren't in his field, but on scale. And then there was a rating agency opinion and petroleum engineers. These people anonymously reviewed his methodology in 2-week sprints. So it happened quickly. He got feedback very fast. And then he had to reply, and it went until there was consensus. There was everyone agreed that this is now going to conservatively remove a ton of carbon equivalent, I mean, the methane reduction. And that took 7 months, not 2 to 3 years. And so his first credits were issued this summer from that field he showed there. We're working with other people on this panel too. Tradewater has an orphan methodology with us. We have other methane abatements methodologies in the pipeline. What we bring is we try to create a collaborative, trustful process that moves quickly. So we encourage ratings. We have rating agencies give opinions in the methodology process. We encourage pre-ratings. We work with insurance companies on our buffer pool creation, and also we encourage insured credits. We follow RMI's social benefit framework for proving out the SDGs and other impacts. What we want to do is be the platform where everything is easily verifiable and shown, that all these great actions that people in MMC and throughout the carbon ecosystem are doing to reduce emissions today. And with methane heating, obviously we all know how important that is to do it today, that they're getting the carbon finance they deserve. So great to be here.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Okay, good timing. Now I'm gonna give you a couple more minutes here, and I'm gonna actually flip through your problem, solution, and what the benefits look like. And that's beautiful. Could you please I'm just gonna go ahead and jump in with my questions. Speak to the bigger picture of the Open Carbon Protocol with regard to the fact that there are numerous voluntary bodies that you can go to for methodologies, and yet down the road we see the likely future, hopefully not too distant future, where there is an international standard of compliance required. So how does what you're doing today fit into that?
Well, so we can start at the most basic level. For the carbon markets, ICVCM has come out as a standard of, a standard of standards, which this market loves to create new standards, but they put out some really great frameworks. And so we're undergoing assessment of that right now to be a core carbon principle approved methodology. But in the really long term, and I appreciate the question, we really see that everything from a compliance obligation where you're submitting that, let's say to CBAM, that you are delivering a lower carbon product, through a voluntary claim where a corporation knows that they need to help drive climate action because their decarbonization curve is too slow for what the world needs. So from voluntary through a compliance crediting, through a book and claim system, through an actual product level reductions, those all need to really follow the same frameworks. And the carbon markets have been up and down for years, but we've really been put through a trial through fire. And we think, using a carbon credit methodology framework can work for that entire process. So that's our future vision. Right now, we're just trying to deliver the best credits that we can, and we're moving down that framework as we see opportunities.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's great that you are keeping the bigger picture in mind. Okay, and I think we did have a question for you, Chris, but we're going to save it for the after the call, after the rest of the companies go. So thanks very much. We're going to move on to the next presenter. I can figure it out. Here we go. Haroon, you are up.
Me. Great.
That is
Thanks,
you.
Monica. Hi, everybody. My name's Haroon, and I'm representing the Sanergy Collaborative here today, and I lead all of our carbon work. So excited to talk about that today. We can go to the next slide, Monica. So the first topic is, what problem is Sanergy out here trying to solve? And the answer is the sanitation crisis in large global south urban centers. So what happens in these urban centers, in some of them, is there are large informal settlements that arise as migration happens to the cities largely for work purposes, and the infrastructure is not there to actually support those people. So where we work in today is Kenya, and in Kenya's largest cities. Our headquarters are in Nairobi, Kenya. And what you see pictured here on the slide are actually some of the sanitation systems that exist in the informal settlements in Nairobi. Specifically, you see a pit latrine that is unimproved, kind of a poor superstructure. And below the ground there is actually a hole that holds all of the sanitation waste that people are depositing into it. And then below you just see another picture of the informal settlements. And so what we are trying to do is to address the sanitation crisis, provide people with a safe place to use toilets, while also diverting that waste from the pit latrine into a less methane intense scenario. So we can go to the next slide, Monica. So what we do is we replace those toilets with what we call Fresh Life toilets. These are improved sanitation options where the waste, instead of going into large pits in the ground and where it stays and releases a lot of methane, instead we capture it in containers and we convey that waste to our composting facility, which you see pictured on the bottom right-hand side of the slide there. And so when we capture that fecal waste and compost it together with other types of food waste, we are actually creating a large delta in methane emissions. And those methane emissions reductions that we've created or are creating, we've actually registered that in the carbon markets under Verra. And we have issued and sold 30,000 carbon credits to date. Our sanitation services are serving about 250,000 people in Kenya today. And all of that waste that they're generating, we are diverting to our composting operations. If we can go to the next slide, please. So these are the people that are benefiting from our services. So it's of course the people in the informal settlements who are using our toilets. And this is really impactful because without our toilets, they're using unimproved structures that you saw on the first slide, but also they have to walk long distances to those toilets. Sometimes they have to pay to access them. They can be particularly unsafe for women and children. And so there's a lot of quality of life upgrades that come alongside our service. And then finally, what happens to the compost? We produce an organic fertilizer that we sell to smallholder farmers across the country. And this acts as an affordable organic input into their farming practices, which we've seen drive farmer yields up to 20, 30%. So that helps grow their incomes and their businesses as well.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, so that's kind of the end of my presentation. Happy to take any questions.
I'm going to throw you one.
Yeah.
Before you started issuing carbon credits, how were you financing the work that you were doing? Because obviously you're providing a service, but what is the ability to quantify the methane emissions reduction, which I think many people don't realize pit latrines are providing that contribution to our global methane budget. So can you explain that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of points in there. Indeed, pit latrines provide a very large. That was my timer, sorry. Pit latrines provide a very large source of emissions. There's been studies that estimate, for example, in Kampala, which is actually in Uganda, over 50% of citywide emissions are coming from unimproved sanitation systems. And majority of that is actually from pit latrines and septic tanks in the informal settlements. In terms of how we are financing our work, it's a combination of financing sources. So we've raised equity. We've also taken on a variety of philanthropic support to scale some of the work. And then now carbon credits and carbon revenues are part of the funding mix, which we're really excited about because it's a more sustainable source of financing. I hope that answers your question, Monica.
Yes, thank you very much.
Great.
Okay. Up next, we have our final presenter, Meg from Tradewater.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Monica. We can start with the first slide, please.
Okay, here we go. Now, I'll give it my best shot.
So to set a little bit of context on Tradewater, globally, scientists and experts have identified that direct short-lived climate forcers such as HFCs, HCFCs, CFCs, and methane have catastrophic effects due to their high global warming potential and their negative impacts on our environment, air quality, water, soil, health, and economy. So while most investments right now are thrown towards long-term carbon removals, there are proven strategies that you've heard today to deliver faster, more impactful impact. So these short-lived climate pollutants are up to 12,700 times more potent than CO2, and cutting them quickly can deliver 4 times the net benefit of CO2 reductions by 2050. So Tradewater's mission originated to tackle some of the thorniest climate issues by finding forgotten or commercially non-viable industrial super pollutant gases and converting them into carbon offset credits to fund future work. We've been doing this work for 15 years and recently surpassed 10 million tons of impact. It started with ozone depleting substance and refrigerant work, which is seen in this canister here. These canisters would rust and leak over time, and we would come in, find, destroy, and then issue carbon credits for these substances. We started in the United States and expanded globally in 2018. Then in 2023, we expanded our work by addressing methane. Next slide, please. We found that our best course of action to address this critical superpollutant was to plug orphaned oil and gas wells leaking methane on private landowner property. As previously stated, these wells have no owner, and yet they pose a serious climate risk with a GWP of 84 times that of CO2 and representing over 30% of today's global warming temperatures from climate change. These orphaned wells can leak harmful, toxic, or noxious gases and fluids into the air, soil, and groundwater that can pose significant risks to surrounding waterways. And these unplugged wells can make land dangerous to build or farm due to explosion hazards and risk of land contamination. Land with orphaned wells can also have lower market value for landowners, placing more hardship on the private landowner and overall local economy. Next slide, please. So at no cost to property owners, our team of engineers, experts, and local contractors will safely plug qualifying wells, ensuring all regulatory requirements are met and land is remediated quickly. We do everything in the process from site inspection to emissions testing to plugging plans to site restoration. Afterwards, land is remediated to meet both state requirements and landowner needs. Our calculations are very conservative in nature and typically go above and beyond standards and regulations. We ensure the plugging and commit to pre and post plugging leak tests. We also perform a permanence check at 12 to 18 months to create a strong verification cycle without requiring uneconomical long-term monitoring. We have plugged up to 15 wells to date and are in the process of plugging 4 more, with our current OOG projects receiving A and AA ratings on MSCI. So we find that now is the time to fund this work and incorporate it into our climate strategies, because if us talking about methane in this room won't put effort, money, and time into this work, no one will. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you, Meg. Okay, so we have heard from 8 different companies approaching methane mitigation across a variety of sources and approaches, geographies. And I want to just stop and thank you all and give you a round of applause. So thank you for presenting in that quick fashion. Really appreciate it. And I want to make sure that we can get everybody back up on the screen for Q&A from the audience. We did have a few questions that were answered in the chat. Here we go. But we do have still over